Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 6 of The Liberal Conservative. Last week, we spoke about religion and government and how they were the original collusion. And that leads us perfectly into this week's episode. This week, we are talking about Iran. So, there's a reason the US government and corporate media have spent 50 years telling you that Iran is the enemy. And it's not because they are. It's definitely not because they're dangerous or any more dangerous than the United States. It's because they never gave in. Iran is one of the only nations on earth that has never been colonized. And that terrifies empires like the United States, Great Britain, and of course Israel. Because a sovereign people is a contagious idea. So Iran, formerly known as Persia, boasts 2,500 plus years of civilization. The West never successfully colonized Iran, unlike its neighbors. Why does that matter? Because Iran's refusal for full economic or military occupation by any Western power is a threat to all Western colonizers. The British and later the Americans still found ways to control from afar, especially via oil. In the imperial playbook, independence is a crime, as we are now realizing here in the United States. The Anglo-Iranian Company and the 1953 coup. Let's talk about that. In 1908, the British discovered oil in Iran and created the Anglo-Persian Oil Company, which today is called BP. In 1951, Iran democratically elected a leader, Mohammad Mossadegh. He had this radical idea to nationalize oil because he wanted Iranians to profit from their own resources. So what did the Americans do? I'll tell you. In 1953, the CIA and the M16 staged a coup called Operation Ajax to remove him. Think about what I just said. A democratic elected leader was removed by the United States from a foreign country because they did not allow Iranians to own their own resources. And they installed a US-backed dictator, the Shah. This marked the beginning of US domination in the Middle East. They called Mossadegh a madman. All he did was ask that his own people and his own country profit from its own resources. Then came the Islamic Revolution, when the West lost control. In 1979, the Iranian Revolution overthrew the Shah, rejected Western puppets, and instituted an Islamic republic under Ayatollah Khomeini. The U.S. responded with sanctions, propaganda, and support for Saddam Hussein in the Iran-Iraq War, leading to over 1 million deaths. Now, please try and connect the dots as I'm speaking. The U.S. supported Saddam Hussein, who they later killed, because they claimed that he had weapons of mass destruction. The hostage crisis was not the start of hostility. It was retaliation for decades of interference. The West didn't hate Iran because it became religious. The West hated Iran because it broke their control. Nuclear lies and the U.S.-Israel agenda. Israel has 90 plus undeclared nuclear weapons. Iran has, and always has had, 0. The U.S. and Israel pushed the false narrative of a nuclear Iran for decades. Why? Well, to justify sanctions and sabotage and Stuxnet virus, assassinations of Iranian scientists, and arms deals with Arab monarchies. Of course. The Iran nuclear deal was actually working until Donald Trump pulled out under pressure from Israel and hawks like John Bolton. And also because Donald Trump doesn't have a brain cell of his own. And so he doesn't understand global policy, global economics, and he doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. So he's just going to do whatever the last person in his ear tells him what to do. He's zero discipline, this guy. So what are the goals of the United States and Israel in this region? Well, it's to maintain dominance, of course, to isolate any anti-Zionist states, which we're watching here, right? They're isolating us as American citizens. We are not allowed to, or they're constantly censoring us from, abandoning what Israel is doing to Gaza and for shouting it out and for saying that they're war crimes. Instead, they're labeling us, anti-Semitic. But really, all they want to do is just secure power and control the gas trade routes. The countries that are screaming nuclear threat is the only one in the region with nuclear weapons and no accountability, which is, of course, Israel. And, of course, under Netanyahu, who's been in power since the 1980s. This guy's been around for a very long time. Iran hasn't invaded another country in 300 years. The U.S. has military bases surrounding Iran on all sides. And by the way, the U.S. has invaded countries all the fucking time, right? Since I was in 8th grade. Israel bombs Syria, assassinates Iranian scientists, and occupies Palestine with impunity. The Western media dehumanizes Iranians to justify the military-industrial complex. Every time Iran is painted as a villain, war profits go up. They're not afraid of Iran's weapons. They're afraid of Iran's resistance. Women in Iran, complexity versus propaganda. The feminist movement in Iran is real and deeply courageous. Western governments weaponize women's rights not to liberate, but to justify regime change. Iranian women don't want bombs. They want freedom without imperial interference. True solidarity with women means amplifying, not colonizing their struggle. We don't liberate women with missiles. Women don't want that. We should be empowering them by listening and not lecturing. The new global order, BRICS, B-R-I-C-S, resistance and the fall of the empire. Iran is now aligning with BRICS. Nations like Russia, China, South Africa, Brazil, emerging global alliances resisting U.S. control. The dollar is weakening and the empire is fracturing. Iran, like Cuba, Venezuela, and Palestine, and others, represent a new axis of sovereignty over subjugation. What if the real global threat is the fall of an empire? So, who profits from the enemy myth? We've been lied to. Iran isn't our enemy. It's the excuse. The reason we're broke, overworked, and surveilled isn't because of some faraway nation. It's because our leaders serve war, not peace. Profit, not people. The sooner we stop believing their enemies are our enemies, the sooner we can start building a world that doesn't need war to survive. Remember I told you that Iran is one of the very few countries that has never been colonized? Well, over 200 countries on this planet, over 90% of them have been colonized at some point in history, some of them more than once. There are very few, and even these weren't entirely untouched by Western influence. Of course, one is Iran. We've already discussed that. But they have been victims to coup and control for foreign control for their oil. Japan maintained its sovereignty but was under U.S. occupation post-World War II for about 7 years. Thailand skillfully navigated between British and French colonial powers. Liberia, founded by freed American slaves, technically independent but highly influenced by the United States. Nepal retained independence despite British pressure. China never formally colonized but suffered semi-colonialism via spheres of influence. North Korea, previously part of a colonized Korea under Japan, but post-World War II remained uncolonized. Technically speaking, only 5 to 6 countries in the world have never been fully colonized, in the conventional sense. Now, let's touch a little bit more on the women in Iran and the reality versus Western propaganda. Iranian women live under a patriarchal theocracy, but so do we, right? We haven't reached those extremes yet. The women in Iran face real danger, not that we don't, because we do here too. It's not the cartoon villain version the West often sells. Their oppression is both systemic and spiritualized. Dress code is heavily enforced. Mandatory hijab laws are enforced by the morality police, which of course we know has no morals, because anything that's run by a group of men asserting control and power over women just means that they want to be able to rape you whenever they want without you holding them accountable or punching them in their nuts. Women risk arrest, beatings, or worse for showing hair or wearing immodest clothing. There is legal inequality. A woman's testimony in court is worth half a man's. No difference than here. It's not legal written somewhere, but we'll just wait for Amy Coney Barrett to make it so. Inheritance laws favor male heirs. Women cannot travel without male permission in some cases. Men can easily divorce, but women need special approval from court. Child custody almost always goes to the father over age 7. Censorship and expression. Female singers cannot perform solo publicly. Dissent is criminalized. Feminists are jailed, beaten, or killed. After the murder of Mahsa Amini, Iranian women led historic protests, burning hijabs, dancing in public, and chanting women life freedom. Now compare that to the United States. Here we don't have the morality police per se, although you can argue that Ted Cruz and J.D. Vance and Peter Thiel and Elon Musk and Donald Trump and many Republicans kind of tend to be the morality police for women. But we do have mass shooters. We have incels. We have Brett Kavanaugh. We have Amy Coney Barrett. We have Alito. We have a completely corrupted Supreme Court and Supreme Court process in place. By the way, stay tuned for next week's episode where we will be diving into the origins of the Supreme Court and what the fuck happened there. So basically, here in the United States, we have patriarchy in a suit. In the U.S., women face mass surveillance without safety. We track our periods in apps that can be used against us. Lack of bodily autonomy because Amy Coney Barrett, a female herself with female children, made it her life, plan to overturn or be part of the overturning of Roe v. Wade. A theocracy in slow motion, basically, is what we have. By the way, I just want you guys to know that if any of those women that are part of the Trump administration right now and part of the theocracy or the slow churning theocracy that we're flowing into, if any of them or their female children need an abortion, they will surely get a safe abortion. They just want to divide you and prevent you from getting an abortion. Okay, just look up Sarah Palin. So in the United States, we also have the highest maternal mortality rate in the developed world, especially, of course, for women of color. There is rampant gender-based violence. This is an astounding statistic. Astounding statistic. 1 in 3, guys, 1 in 3 American women will be sexually assaulted. 1 in fucking 3. And then we have gun culture, of course. Domestic abusers with weapons are statistically the biggest threat to women. God forbid we fight back and shoot them. Then, we'll go to jail. Because that's just the way that patriarchy works. They protect the patriarchy. And then, of course, we have economic violence. The wage gap is real. So is unpaid labor and lack of childcare. Now, the wage gap is real, but still, statistically, women are buying more homes than men right now, and women are making more money than men right now, right? Because we're still beating them, even though they've tried to literally suppress us their entire existence. So let's talk about who shows up for Iran and Palestine. Well, it's not the Arab monarchies, of course, because Saudi Arabia is partnered with the United States and Israel to form anti-Iran coalitions. They fear Iran's revolutionary ideology and don't want women to be free in any Islamic model. Qatar, well, they just gave Trump a $400 million plane, and they host U.S. military bases and mediate diplomacy, but won't challenge the empire. Dubai is a facade, obsessed with image, wealth, and Western approval, and the symbol of performative progress. The Arab monarchies don't help Palestine or Iran because they serve empire, not people. Regional powers, where do they stand? Well, Russia aligns with Iran strategically, especially in Syria. It sees Iran as a counterweight to U.S. dominance, but won't go to war with them won't go to war for them because Russia doesn't want to go to war with the United States. Uses Iran to project power, but it's a cold alliance, not a moral one. And by the way, if you're wondering why Tucker Carlson is now on his podcast so mysteriously sounding like a liberal, like a Democrat, defending Palestine and actually not applauding a war in Iran, is because Tucker Carlson is a Russian bot and he is going to do the bidding for Russia. It's what he's always done. So it is not in Russia's best interest for the United States to get involved with a war in Iran because Russia relies on Iran. So let's talk about Pakistan. Well, it's incredibly fragile. It's torn between U.S., China, and Islamic alliances. It supports Palestine rhetorically, but won't confront Israel or protect Iran. And then we have Syria, which is Iran's closest Arab ally. Syria relies on Iran and, of course, Russia for survival post-U.S.-backed insurgency. Iran helped Syria hold off total collapse, but both are isolated, sanctioned, and demonized. Afghanistan is in total chaos under the Taliban rule, no capacity to support anyone, not even themselves. And Iran hosts millions of Afghan refugees, often without international aid. And then there's China. You want to know who really polices the world? Not the United States, not the UN. It's China. Quietly, strategically, and without firing a single missile. China's approach has never been about war. Since 1979's border with Vietnam, China has not been in a war. It pursues economic dominance, and it's winning, and it's going to get it, not military conquest. China wants Taiwan, has wanted Taiwan for the longest time, but unlike the United States, it doesn't invade to get what it wants. It waits, it isolates, and it builds allies, and it builds economic wealth. It funds projects like the Belt and Road Initiative, building ports, railways, and digital infrastructure across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Has major trade deals with Iran despite U.S. sanctions. China doesn't bomb, it builds. And that's why it's winning, and that's why it will win. So no, Saudi Arabia won't save Iran. Dubai won't save Palestine. They're too busy buying yachts and approving Taylor Swift tours. But China plays the long game. They don't need to invade to win. And maybe that's the lesson. Peace is more powerful than profit, but only if you're not addicted to war. The American empire loves to talk about freedom, but somehow always finds itself bombing the places that are developing their own freedom without American control or input, especially if they're Muslim, brown, or have resources, and especially if their women are too brave to stay quiet. Now, do you remember last year Assad fled Syria because they overthrew the government in Syria? Well, Assad is still the president of Syria, ruling over a shattered country that he shattered, by the way. Syria is partially occupied, and U.S. troops are still illegally stationed in oil-rich northeast Syria. Turkey controls the northern border zones. Turkiya, that's what they want to be called now. And Israel bombs Damascus regularly. Syria is rebuilding slowly with aid from Russia, China, and Iran. Assad didn't win because he was strong. He won because the empire overplayed its hand and Russia was willing to play dirtier. We have to remember that the U.S. is always funneling weapons and money to so-called rebels in the Middle East, especially when it is holding democratic elections and when the country is becoming stable and democratic. Like the United States is a warmonger because they make, if you listen to the military industrial complex episode, the power and the money comes from war. So the United States is always wanting to be in war because that's how they make money. It's actually atrocious. We're the bullies of the world. We've caused so much destruction that I actually think it's only karma and fair that we are having this internal turmoil now. We're finally paying the piper, basically. I want to briefly give you a history of an example of the game changer in Syria with Russia and the United States. So the United States, like I said, was funneling money into rebels into Syria. And by 2015, Assad was losing badly, and the U.S. was debating how fast he'd fall. But Putin had other plans. Russia began bombing U.S.-backed rebel strongholds, defending Syrian infrastructure and securing Assad's position. They didn't just show up, they stayed. Iran sent weapons, troops, and Hezbollah units. Russia deployed jets, missiles, and elite troops. The West watched their plan fall apart. Assad didn't survive because he was popular. He survived because he had real allies, while we had mercenaries. And like I said, Assad is still the president of Syria right now. Complete disaster capitalism. We have to have some type of pattern recognition. Syria was kind of a Libya 2.0, right? Muammar Gaddafi was overthrown in Libya in 2011 after a similar playbook. Protests, chaos, NATO bombing, regime collapse, open-air slave markets today. The same thing was planned for Syria. But unlike Libya, Syria had Russia, Iran, and Hezbollah. Libya had no one. Every time the U.S. goes to liberate, we leave behind graves. But in Syria, the graves were our own because the myth of American moral power died there, and the world saw it. Before the West destroyed Libya, it had the highest standard of living in Africa. Free education, free healthcare, interest-free loans, zero external debt. One man made that possible. His name was Muammar Gaddafi, and the U.S. made sure he didn't live to tell the tale. In 2010, Libya under Gaddafi had the highest human development index in Africa. Free education and healthcare for all citizens. State-funded housing and marriage grants. Zero tuition for college, even abroad. A gold-backed dinar Gaddafi was developing to challenge the petrodollar. Massive water pipeline project called the Great Man-Made River. He wasn't a dictator. He was a threat to global finance. The real crime, gold and sovereignty. Gaddafi's gold-backed currency plan, the African dinar, threatened the dominance of the U.S. dollar, of the French franc used in former African colonies, and Western oil contracts. He advocated for a unified Africa, free from IMF and World Bank debt. He tried to free Africa from the West chokehold. That's when they labeled him a monster. The U.S., NATO attacked him and demanded a regime change. In 2011, under Obama and Hillary Clinton, funded and armed rebels, created a no-fly zone, which became a full bombing campaign, destroyed Libya's infrastructure, allowed rebel forces to capture and brutally murder Gaddafi on camera. We didn't just assassinate a leader, we assassinated Africa's future. Hillary Clinton's soundbite, or paraphrased, reenacted. literally said, "We came, we saw, he died." That's what she said. The aftermath was a nation in ruins. Post-2011, Libya is a failed state. Competing governments and militias, no functioning central bank, open-air slave markets where African migrants are sold, widespread rape, famine, and displacement. They told us it was a humanitarian cause, but we turned Libya into hell. So the pattern recognition here, it's always the same script. Demonize the leader, fabricate atrocities, arm insurgents, launch airstrikes, steal resources, and leave chaos. If they can do it to Libya, they can do it to anyone, and they do, and they will continue to. The only way to survive the empire is to be too strong or too useful to kill. Gaddafi wasn't perfect, no leader is, except for Nelson Mandela. But if perfection were the standard, every United States president would be an exile. The truth is, he tried to build an Africa that could stand on its own. And for that, they hunted him like an animal. Libya didn't fall, it was killed. So let's stop pretending these wars just happen. They're planned, they're funded, and they're scripted. And they're marketed. And in 2025, there are 3 men you need to watch. And it's Donald Trump, Benjamin Netanyahu, and Jared Kushner. Because they don't want peace, they want legacy, oil, money, power, and real estate. So Trump's been on Truth Social campaigning and staging news about Iran. He's been on Fox News promising to stand with Israel no matter what. Can he send U.S. troops into war again, alone, without congressional approval? The short and very fucking scary answer is yes. Temporarily, yes, he can. Presidents can launch limited military action under the War Powers Resolution of 1973 without congressional approval for up to 60 days. That means Trump could bomb Iran, deploy troops to Israel, or engage in combat without asking Congress as long as he notifies them. And Congress must approve if it lasts beyond 60 days. But by then, the war machine is already moving. War is the one power the presidency abuses like a loaded gun, and there are no background checks. Why is Netanyahu so obsessed with Iran? Well, because peace would end his political career and his freedom. Netanyahu is facing multiple corruption trials, and war keeps him in power. Iran is the only major Middle East power that opposes Israeli occupation of Palestine, funds Hezbollah and Hamas, both enemies of Israel, rejects normalization deals with Gulf monarchies, and Netanyahu sells Iran as an existential threat to justify. By the way, he's been doing this since the 1990s, maybe even longer. U.S. military funding is $3.8 billion a year to Israel. And he wants to do surveillance state expansion. He wants crackdowns on dissent, permanent occupation of Gaza and the West Bank. If Iran disappeared tomorrow, Netanyahu would have no enemy left to blame. And Jared Kushner is the real estate broker of war. He's Donald Trump's son-in-law, as you all know, turned shadow Secretary of State, a man who brokered peace deals while cashing checks from the very regimes at war. Kushner is the architect of the Abraham Accords, normalized Israeli ties with Dubai and Bahrain and Sudan and Morocco, excluded Palestine completely, strengthened U.S.-Israel Gulf alliance against Iran. After leaving office, he received $2 billion from Saudi Arabia, sovereign's wealth fund, invested in Israel tech, real estate, and surveillance companies. He's been on camera saying that they just need to remove all the Palestinians, that it's very valuable real estate there. He's financially benefited from every side of this economic war. He didn't drain the swamp, he monetized it. Jared turned diplomacy into a PayPal button. It's really just all about control. Trump talks tough on Iran to win the evangelical vote. Netanyahu bombs children to stay out of prison. Kushner plays both sides to stay rich. And the bodies pile up in Tehran, Gaza, Damascus, and Rafah. This isn't foreign policy. It's organized crime with a Star of David label and a MAGA hat. Iran is the last domino, the one that never bowed. That's why they want it broken. That's why Trump screams war, why Netanyahu needs nukes, why Kushner sold peace like condos in Manhattan. But here's the truth. If these men could profit from genocide, they already have. And if we let them do it again, there won't be anything left to save. This isn't politics, it's a legacy laundering. The sons of war aren't just inheriting power, they're weaponizing it. Every war has a salesman. Every genocide has a marketing team. And behind every president, there's a bloodline of men and women who didn't just benefit from empire, they expanded it. Jared Kushner was raised in wealth, connected to Netanyahu since childhood. He is helped orchestrate, the Abraham Accords to isolate Iran and erase Palestine. Ivanka's role in female empowerment optics while Trump defunded reproductive care globally. Jared didn't just broker peace, he brokered genocide futures at a premium. Israel isn't defending itself from anything. Israel knew what was going to happen. It had probably orchestrated October 7th, actually. It's just defending a business model. Permanent war, permanent surveillance, and more money. So in conclusion, I really hope that you took a lot from this episode. I really hope that you do your own research. If there's anything that you didn't know, anything that you question, and you really dig deep. Understanding that Google and all of the tech that we use to find information is purchased by people that want us to believe a certain narrative. So research that you do has to go beyond just a simple Google search. That's not always going to give you what you need. You need to read history books. Why do you think they're banning books? Why do you think they're banning so many things? It's because they want to rewrite the history. I'm going to leave you with this. Many years ago, I was talking to one of my colleagues who was from the Middle East. And in our conversation, I was a lot less knowledgeable about, the Middle East structures as I am now. He says to me, listen, books are written by the winner. And you know what? I never forgot that. Because he's right. Books, in regards to history, are written by the winner. And the winner is going to want you to see history through their eyes. The losers often aren't alive to tell you what their history was. And guess what? The losers are actually the winners.